When Prohibition came into force in 1920, it was meant to end the production, sales, and transportation of alcoholic beverages. Instead, it was the beginning of perhaps the most infamous criminal period in US history because, very simply, most Americans liked a drink and many didn't care where it came from. At the time, many wineries were based in downtown Los Angeles, which was surrounded by agriculture and was the center of the wine region's trade. There were more vineyards in the valleys, just a few dozen miles away too. Barely a dozen of them made it to the end of Prohibition in 1933, and some merchants paid a higher price for their barrels and bottles than falling foul of the new law. Austrian-born Frank Boangataga was a successful Californian vintner who disappeared in 1926, and his mysterious disappearance hit the headlines for decades afterward, perhaps because it had all the ingredients of a murder mystery. Boangataga, 43, owned a winery in downtown's Lincoln Heights, Western grape products in Cucamonga, some 47 miles east, as well as vineyards, some several ranches, and a trucking company. A day or so before his disappearance, he cashed 2 checks for a total of $1,500, nearly $27,000 today. And after lunch with an associate on November 25th, he said he was driving to his trucking company to deliver the payroll and was never seen again. Later that day, Boamgatika's wife, Mary, received a letter from Frank, postmarked from San Diego, much further south than the trucking company's location. It urged her not to worry, that he would write or call, and that business was bad. As you know, Mary was surprised, as this was the first time he had written to her in English rather than their native German. And she recalled that before he left, Boamgatika said he was approached by 6 Italians from Chicago, demanding that he sell them his operation. Boamgatika had acquired one of special licenses that were an exception to Prohibition and was now providing wine for medicinal purposes, the others being for cosmetics, homebrews, and sacramental use. Previous to that, Boamgatika had been approached by a man named Zora, who had set up a still in the winery, but the vintner had refused point blank. Zora was a straight of the Sicilian-Italian crime family who were looking to get control of bootlegging and whiskey making in the city, and Boamgatika may have known his fate was sealed after kicking him out, as he told his secretary, "I have signed my death warrant." Some reports gasped that Al Capone himself had been one of the 6, and while this was soon proved to be false, it certainly sold newspaper. 2 days after Boamgatika left LA, that day in 1926, his custom-built purple Cadillac was found in a garage in San Diego with his empty wallet inside. An eyewitness had seen a man driving the car whose description did not fit that of Boamgatika. The police found other items that did not belong to him, as well as a secret compartment containing checks and bills, but the only real clue was his splattering of sharp-eyed detectives suspected it was from a location in Riverside Country that was known as a gang land cemetery. But his disappearance kept hitting the headlines, as it was less than a year since the St. Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago had shocked the country. Just a few weeks later, in early 1930, the downtown winery was raided by federal agents who seized 700,000 gallons of wine and 200,000 gallons of brandy and arrested 5 employees. At the time, it was the biggest haul in South California's history, and people wondered, were the feds showing the men's business to whoever was or now in charge? In May, police thought they had found Botigart's body in a vat Cucamonga winery, but it was in fact Stefano Buta, who had been overcome by fumes while cleaning the container. A few months after that, the rumor mill went into overdrive when an LA crime boss, Tony Bucola, who claimed to know what happened to Boamgatika, himself went missing. More obviously, Boamgatika's other Western grape partners, Joseph Newman and Arnold Bosch, subsequently disappeared too. Less than a year after Boamgatika's disappearance, Newman's car was found with the door open and the key inside, but no sign of him. There was suspicion that he had been playing ball with the mob, but had stepped out of line and was taken for a ride. Some said Boamgatika had been cooperating with the mob and slipped up too, but his story just wouldn't go away. Over the next few years, there were sightings of him in places across America, Mexico, and even El Salvador. Skeletons were examined in Arizona, Mexico, and the Mojave Desert, among others, but none proved to be Boamgatika, who had distinctive dental work on a metal plate in his shoulder. Following the plot of A Good Mystery, issue of money came into play in 1937 when it was revealed that Boamgatika had life insurance policy worth $360,000, nearly $8 million today. The insurance company weren't paying out, of course, and instead offered a reward of $20,000, nearly $440,000 today, for information, and Mary eventually had to go to court to fight them. She had offered her own bounty of $1,000, also to no avail, and now some wondered whether Boamgatika had left to start a new life. After all, he has said, business was bad. As you know, in his last letter, and there was a case of tax fraud pending against him and several others at Western Grape in 1940. The Swiss-born Butch, Western Grape's manager and resident chemist, who had repelled an advance from Italian gangsters in 1930 and perhaps assumed he was going to be left alone, wrote his son saying he was leaving for the desert, alongside a cryptic mention of a couple of million of dollars. He too was never seen or heard from again, almost 20 after Bogatyka's disappearance, and soon after Mary's death in 1949, the LAPD got a tip and excavated the basement of a Lincoln Heights home that once belonged to a bootlegger. Once again, nothing was found. Finally, in 1977, notorious mafia hitman Frank Bompesiano was murdered. He had many confirmed kills on his record, and more suspected. Bogatyka was one of the latter, but since his body was never found, we will never know. In 2018, Angelino Wine Company began operation in downtown Los Angeles. They were the first winery to open in the area since Prohibition, but the only dangerous decision now is whether to order red, white, or rose.